Welcome to our extraordinary meeting of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Can I please hand the rako over to you, Charlie, to open us this morning? Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Tēnei te mihi kia tātou hu mai nei tēnei ata. Kia ora kia tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te toki.
Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tā. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mai ora. Tēnā koe, Charlie. Kia ora. Just a warm welcome to you all, particularly Dr. Nick Peat, your first council meeting today. So today is quite a light agenda. We only have 4 items today. Can I please ask for any apologies for today's meeting? Maybe lateness from Councillor Hokianga. Apologies from Tanya Hotmans. Are there any more? There are none. I'm happy to move. Second, Councillor Van Beek. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Are there any notices for today? There are none. Conflict of interest declarations? There are none. And then on to the confirmation of minutes from our last council meeting on the 28th of June. Are there any alterations, additions to be made to those minutes? If there are none, can I move Councillor Van Beek, Councillor Williams? All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. We do head on to our decision items. So can I please invite our team up? Thank you. Desi, Sarah, Mandy and Mike. So we have the annual plan 23-24 feedback received from the engagement that we had with the public. So just hand it over to you. Thank you, Sarah.
Kia ora. Kia ora tātou. I'd probably take the first paper as read. This is just a summary of the feedback and the engagement process that we ran. So we received 87 submissions. 3 of them were separate written submissions. And as a bar of comparison, the last time we had a consultation rather than a feedback process for the annual plan was post-COVID, 2021, and we received 118 submissions, but there were 2 very specific options we asked the public to feedback on. So, so that's where we are. If there's any questions on the submission process or the campaign that we ran, I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Any questions or clarifications? Oh, well, just a thank you to the team. I know we had a more condensed engagement period given the cyclone and the recovery period that we're in. So I'm happy to move the paper if I can have a seconder. Councillor Roadley, would you like to speak, Councillor?
Yes. Kia ora, and thank you, team, for the work that you've done through this process, and also for providing the opportunity to consult in person in Wairoa. We appreciated that. And this is my first annual plan process, and my goodness, what a difficult activity it's been to balance this difficult challenges that are ahead as we right our ship and deal with the challenges from the 14th of February. I think my personal commitment was around how do we support our environment and our communities that live within that environment, and I was pretty committed. I think right from the get-go there was nearly foot stamping around keeping our rates down, and so I really commend you on your ability to trim back within the organisation so that we could support our communities and our businesses by reducing that rates demand, and I thank you for that. I was really heartened from the submissions, and so thank you to all the people who got themselves organised and submitted in. They were the equestrian community, fabulous response, and we definitely take that on board. And the difficulties obviously arise as we really turn our minds to the reviews and being mindful with our frugal with our rates money and your money, the people's money that we are kaitiaki of. To do that, I think, is one of our most difficult things as we go forward, and I'm really looking forward to as we move into our long-term plan for those people for us to bring those important ideas through. I feel the pain of people who've worked and look forward to our regional parks and other important works that have had to be deferred, but I feel really confident that around the table we will bring those in through our long-term plans. So thank you so much to our submitters. I think that's enough waffle for me, but yeah.
Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Curtin.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair, and welcome to the Deputy Chair online.
Will.
There, Will. Just in terms of the process, this is not adopting the plan. We're adopting the plan next week.
Yes,
is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're simply receiving the feedback.
Yes.
And then in a later paper, we've got deliberation and any changes thereof. That's the process today.
Exactly. And then adoption next week.
Adoption next week.
Yes.
Thank you. Just on the feedback, if you like, well done, got out there, and I particularly was pleased with the online feedback, and obviously that's an important portal for us to be working on for the future. It's obviously generating some significant level of interest, so well done on that.
Thank you, Councillor. All those are correct. Oh, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to acknowledge the submitters as well, in particular commend the equestrian community for their initiative taken. Wairoa District Council, just to share that, we're with that community, and the decision to defer the regional park for a year is in line with what we're doing in Ahuriri as well. So that's something we've not lost sight of by any stretch. It's just, as the submission acknowledges, a reflection of where we're at the moment. Very extreme pressures every which way we look. I just, on the forest and bird submission, the point made about deer and predator control, this isn't something that local government can handle. We've got some local LGNZ remits coming up in the next section of the paper, and I just want to socialise the idea that I think local government really needs to run a campaign at central government level to get effective funding and logistical structural support for predator control, including deer, but not confined to deer, or everything that we do in the recovery resilience context, from riparian planting through to land for life, is at risk and could effectively be undermined, and it has major implications for biodiversity, greenhouse gas emissions, as that submission points out. So just don't want to lose sight of that. But right now, back to what Di said, we're in a very difficult space, and I think thank you to the community for your submissions, but we've landed in a pretty good place.
Any other speakers? There are none. All those who agree to receive this paper, say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Leading on to our next paper, Recovery Cyclone Recovery Charge. I'll wait for Andrew to arrive, but you will remember in the engagement document, we proposed a regional cyclone recovery charge of $75 per SOIP. And in the process of doing the financial statements, etc., for the annual plan, we found that tipped us over the 30% of UAGC or targeted rates set on a uniform basis.
So we are proposing 3 options to rectify that, to bring us below the 30%, but still collect the same amount of money that we had ring fenced for response and recovery, which was $5.6 million. And the preferred option proposed is to, so on everyone's rates invoice, they would have 2 lines. One would say regional cyclone recovery rate fixed charged, $55 per SOAP, and there'd be another line saying regional recovery cyclone charged variable, and that would be on land value, is our proposal. Want to add? Thank you, Desi. Questions, clarifications, Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you, Desi. When I read the paper, I was thinking, okay, how does this work? The 1.5 allocated, it says $20 per SOAP allocated based on equalised land value. Is that $20 sort of a midpoint in the range, or you're just trying to get the extra $20 that was part of the initial 75 in a way that would track land value? Have you got a sense of what that range might be? Have we got an upper bound and lower bound of what that $20 might actually end up being for some of the higher value properties?
We do
rural properties?
have that, not attached, but I can provide that.
Yeah, well, I'm just would like to know that, at least in ballpark terms, before approving this, just to understand. I mean, if it was $1,000 for a rural property, I'd have a problem. I doubt it is. But if it was $100, less of a problem. But I just don't think we should be confirming this without understanding, at least in ballpark terms, the upper and lower bounds of what we're approving.
Can we just invite one of our rates team members to come and address that question?
Just gotta look at them.
While that's been looked up, can I ask Councillor Foley to put your question to the table, and then we'll come back, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Curtin, although I can't see him anymore for that greeting. My question really was on the same lines, just referring to point 9, where it says that whichever option we choose actually will result in large increases. So I don't quite have the same doubt as Councillor Williams. It sounds like there will be some significant increases based on this change. So basically just waiting for the same answer.
Thanks, Councillor. So when it says large, how large are we talking?
Yeah, so they just want like a sample.
Well, we could show this. This is the actual sample properties. Would that be fine? While we wait for that answer, any other questions? Councillor Curtin.
Yes, Desiree may, or the team may be able to answer that. Can I go to option 3, which offers the same deal except 3.8% rate rise? The general rate is cast on capital value, isn't it?
Land value.
Land value.
Oh, land value, sorry, yes. So essentially, it's the same option as LV. So we get down to the LV CV discussion. Why have you landed on LV?
LV, sure. So just the difference between doing it on general rate and it's a targeted rate is literally you'd have it as 2 lines on the rates invoice. So you can, it was trying to tell that story that we've ring fenced it. So that's why we preferred the targeted rate over the general rate, but you're right, it is the same impact on the ratepayer. And the reason that we landed on land value versus capital is we thought it had a less, there's some big properties like Cape Kidnappers or some big farms that are nowhere near a flood protection scheme. So we felt that that was a fairer way to use land value rather than capital value. So big properties with a higher, intensely developed, so they'll have a higher capital value that are not benefiting more from flood protection, pay less under land value than they would under capital value.
So you're suggesting Cape Kidnappers couldn't afford the extra?
Or a big, something that's not related to flood protection.
And it is also how we impose the general rate, so.
But it's much broader than flood protection, though, isn't it? It's a whole impact on community civil defence. The entire suite of impact in the community is wrapped up in this recovery, isn't it? It's simply not. It's not just their locality in relation to a flood protection scheme. I mean, I'm assuming those folk drive on the highway. They need protection. Their roading needs protection as well, etc. So I wonder at the veracity of adopting that approach.
So yeah, there's two things there. It's whether on principle it's a better methodology, and two, what does it do to the impact on the ratepayer. So we felt that the land value had less of a major swing.
Yes.
Could we have a look at the ranges?
Yeah,
please?
so this is just for
Can we
sample
get clarity
property.
on that question that was asked, though? That was in regards to what is going to be, where's the charge going to be targeted at? So Councillor Curtin talked about roading there. Is roading part of that recovery?
No.
What is?
So that's the 70, so in the engagement,
Sort of is.
I mean, yeah. So in the engagement document, there was a pie graph that broke down what that $75 was. So 1.9 million was for the reviews and external advisory support, so directly related to the cyclone. 800,000 odd was for rates and fee remissions. 400 for debt funding, and 1.9 for increased capacity and support to support recovery activities. So we are trying to ring fence things directly that were related to the cyclone that weren't planned for.
So that's the range of work that's going to be covered within this, with this, it's been suggested with this fund.
Yes.
So the real question is here is how is it going to be charged? Is it capital value or is it land value?
Yes.
That's the real question.
Correct, yes.
Those are the options.
So it's winners and losers in both of these,
Yes.
both these scenarios.
She answered that though.
So these are just the sample properties that we usually have in the reports. So this is some rural properties. We have Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa on here, and you can see the fixed charge rate here, and then the variable charge down here.
If we can't.
Okay, can you zoom that?
Easier to see.
Make it bigger?
If you could read some of those figures out, please. Oh, it's better now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's much better. Better? Councillor Foley, can you see that on your screen?
Yeah, so basically just a query then. So the first CHB sample property, the $55 is there, and then what would have been another $20 now becomes $314. Am I reading that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I just have. Sorry, I need to come and look at this. I can't see.
Yeah, so if you could just go up a little bit, you have the land value at the top here. So they have 9 million for the land value for Central Hawke's Bay. And that's where the 314 comes from for the variable.
Sorry, which column should I be looking at?
This one right here, for example. So it's every second column. So the column to the left is last year, and then the column to the right is this current year, for what we're proposing.
And sorry, so just another query then. So back to that first example property, what does 55 plus 314 look like in terms of an increase? Because it must be quite a lot more than our initial proposal.
Yeah, so that property in particular goes up almost 8%, but that's for everything, that includes everything.
Up to 8%.
Okay, and the next two are quite significant increases.
Yes, but that's just the rural properties.
There's additional rates. So I can't make anything of that paper. Now I can.
Question, Madam Chair?
Sure, yes.
So in between, with your graph there,
where does the burden sit in regards to, so you're proposing land value, so where does the burden sit in regards to that charge? Is it with rural or was it with, town?
Rural.
Mostly rural.
And the other way around, but we have taken capital versus,
It would still primarily be the rural. They're usually the ones that end up getting a little bit harder hit, but
Commercial.
it would share the load with the commercial and some of the higher residential properties.
Yeah, can I just ask a question about this? Because my understanding is that we've gone down this fixed charge as it was model of $75 a property
Yes.
to offset a greater percentage rate increase.
Yeah.
Our current rates model for general rates is all land-based, and I understand that for general rates, we can't have a split model of land and capital. So if we're transferring part of what would otherwise have been a land-based percentage rate increase to this fixed charge, I can't imagine that we could have a hybrid capital and land value. So I could be wrong about that, that's my question. Could we even go there?
We can because it's a targeted rate.
Okay, so we could do this differently because it's targeted, we could go to capital. I just honestly suggest that perhaps if we could have these printed out and hold this paper to enable us to have a read of it, I would feel more comfortable understanding, because I can't see the top of the columns and the bottom of the columns, and I literally don't know what I'm voting for or being asked to consider.
Are there any time restrictions?
I'm only talking about
On
10
this?
minutes, quarter of an hour, something like
Right.
that, to have a look at it.
Yep, let's, I think we can provide this and another table that might be able to help with the understanding of it. I think that was provided to councillors last
Yes,
week.
we have seen it.
Yeah, so I can
It's in- yeah, we have
reproduce
got it.
that.
Where is it?
It'll be in Stella. Don't know, if you know which meeting it was, then we can go back into Stella and we'll find it there.
In the workshop folder?
Yes, all right, yeah,
We'll reproduce it anyway.
yeah, we'll reproduce it, yep.
I haven't seen it before, sorry.
All right, so are councillors, members happy to just hold that until we have all the
Well, if
information?
everyone else is happy to go ahead, fine, but I'm just telling you.
No, I'd rather delay as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, what we're going to have to do then is, if everyone's comfortable, head on to the last item, because we can't resolve 6 until we've resolved 5, item 5.
Yeah.
So let's head to item 7 for now. Yep. It's the local government AGM meeting, our voting remits. So it is proposed that Councillor Hawke take our vote. He will be there that day. We do have a council meeting that day, which is why we've asked him to be given that responsibility at the AGM in Christchurch. Now we just need to consider in which way we'd like to go for each of the remits. Can I just check with you, Leanne, that there is an option to abstain?
Yes.
So we don't need to support or oppose if we don't feel like that's our mandate to do as a regional council. So that is also an option for each of those. Have councillors had a chance to look at each remit? Yes. Right, are there any questions or clarifications from the paper before we head into our remit decisions?
I've just got a question regarding the paper. If you, for instance, go to the recommendations and you go to remit 7, I may be reading this completely wrong, it talks about earthquake-prone buildings, but if I go actually to the paper itself and I go to remit 7, it's rural and regional public transport. Couldn't quite marry the two up. Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
Leanne?
I'm just going to have to go back to that paper.
just be a typo because it's.
I think it's a
08.
typo,
It's just
councillor Van Beek.
unbelievable.
Good reading.
They do wrong.
Negative residual life.
Just make sure in the actual remits that I've got the right
And I
one
couldn't
there.
see anything on earthquakes, so I looked for it and couldn't find it, so.
It's remit 9. Earthquakes was 9, I think.
9.
Yeah.
Don't have a 9.
In the remit paper, it's /09, page 28.
It's just alignment issues, most likely.
Yeah, so remit 7 is rural and regional public transport.
Yes, yep.
And the earthquake-prone buildings is remit 9. So that'll just be a typing error in the paper.
In the paper, okay.
So there's no
So
remit
it's
9,
correct up the
There's no
top
9.
in number 8, but not, the reason it's not outlined in the report itself is because it's not really relevant to regional councils.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah, makes sense.
So don't get too hung up on the numbers in the paper.
Yeah,
the
that's
substantive,
right, and
the
the
headings is the
name.
one you need
The
to.
ones in the
Yeah.
actual remits that really matter.
Okay, so some corrections, alignments can be made with the paper later, as long as
Yeah.
we know what we're voting on
Yes,
for each remit.
definitely. So let me,
Right, so I may run this just a hard line if you don't mind, because we could be here all day on each of them. So what I might do is just take our vote on which way we'd like to go for each, if that's acceptable for everyone. And there can be comments made as we do that. So I'll start with the first remit, allocation of risk and liability in the building sector. So we can either support, oppose or abstain. Okay.
Chair, I think the paper was proposing that 1, 6 and 9 weren't us. Paragraph 8
10.
1, 6
and 9,
and 9.
yes. Paragraph 8, remits 1, 6 and 9 are relevant only in respect of district and city.
Okay.
So we stay out of
So we're
that.
happy to abstain from
Yep.
1, 6 and 9?
Mhm.
Yep. Thank you. Remit 2, rates rebate.
I had some questions to the staff about that because I didn't quite understand how that legislation that they're referring to aligns with our own LTP policies.
Raise the income.
Do we have someone here to answer that? Probably Desiree is probably the best person.
Yeah.
Send her off to do it, John.
Will we
I
return to that one?
will,
Treasury paying.
so this is a proposal for, it at the moment, it has no bearing on the regional council's rates policies. What is asking for is for LGNZ to advocate to central government to make some changes to increase the thresholds and stuff that we use for our rates remission policies. So those would, if the central government did take on board what they were saying and made those changes, then those would flow through in future to our rates remission policies.
So
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, so our current rates remission policy is triggered by a threshold that's actually set by central legislation currently.
Yes.
I also have a question, and I don't know, Leanne, it's unfair, but you might be able to answer it. In the background and context of the paper, it says that the rates rebates are available from the Department of Internal Affairs. So does that mean that it's a pass-through in this case? So for this kind of a rebate, actually, this council gets reimbursed by DIA for that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, yes.
So that was the next question, is what are the consequences for our financial position in doing this?
So nothing at the moment.
Yeah.
It'll just be a consideration that we need to make if there are changes at the central government level. At this stage, they're just wanting to advocate for it.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So we're discussing at the moment, number 10, remit 02.
Yes.
See, I read that totally differently. What I read there is actually that from a rates rebate point of view, if a householder who's on a benefit applies for a rebate on their rates, the councils will have prior visibility of which rated properties have got people who are dependent on MSD. Is that not what it says?
No.
That's what I read out of this.
What they're advocating for is to raise the threshold, so somebody that is a homeowner may still be on a limited income, which they consider is too low at the moment, in order to qualify that. With the current economic situation, you'll find a lot of what they call the working poor, if you know what I mean. Like, it's a capital asset, but they may not be making a whole lot extra above what they're actually paying for their mortgage and all of that sort. So they want to lift that level so that more people will be eligible if they need it. So say it's at 75,000 total household income is where the threshold is set. They want to move that.
I get that, okay.
And that's because it's been a long time coming in terms of shifting that threshold.
Yeah, so there hasn't been a change in a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
And if it gives members some comfort, I think if government was even minded to do it, it would come back and talk to local government about its proposals.
Remember, these
So
are just...
this is very early in a process that might not even occur.
Because currently we don't have this visibility, do we? As a council?
No, this is our opportunity for our governing body.
That's what I'm reading.
To advocate.
Yeah.
I'm happy to propose that we support this particular one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All agree?
Yep.
All right, remit 3, road and transport maintenance funding.
Or
whatever it has on the paper.
For this one.
I'm happy to support that one.
Yeah, I think it's an easy one to support. We're all...
Just a query around that, Madam Chair. I just wondered whether lobbying political parties directly from LG&Z is the appropriate way to do this. Would it be more appropriate to go through each regional transport plan and have the regional transport committee conduct that engagement with various political parties? What's the best approach here to actually make progress? How does that work?
Councillor Williams.
I've got some thoughts about that, Councillor Curtin, and I think this is a united we stand situation. Effectively, at the moment, regional transport committees, as I keep sharing in that context, are writing letters to Santa every 3 years of what they'd like, and there's a certain amount of toys in the sled, and they get chucked around, and they land where they do. But there is no sort of strategic approach, 2050, what do we need, what's it going to cost, how we're going to fund it, and realistically how that's going to be achieved. And local government, particularly through Neil Holdham at New Plymouth, who's been spearheading this, is really looking at getting itself together in a coordinated way to put pressure as a sector on central government, and I think is likely to get greater traction and success in doing that than as a collection of regional transport committees. So that's not to say RTCs wouldn't come in behind as well, but it doesn't trouble me that this is LGNZ lobbying political parties as such. I just think we need to apply that pressure in every which way we can at all levels, and this is one that I support. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I think that's...
Well, probably whatever way works really is.
Yeah, and I think this is one way that will work, but not to the exclusion of, say, RTCs also combining. As we are doing, we're aligning more closely with Tairāwhiti and Horizons in our endeavours as well, so...
An all-in approach we can. Thank you. Any other questions on that remit? Right, so all happy to support. I'll put a nest next to that, kapai. Local election accessibility. Are there any questions? No?
I can't imagine why we wouldn't support this one.
Yeah, no, that's right. Happy to support, yes. Yes. Ability for co-chairs at formal meetings.
Still Zoom.
Are there any questions, clarifications needed for this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question we've, debated ourselves from time to time, and I think to further explore it, we landed in the knowledge that co-chairs are not possible under the Local Government Act at the moment, and that's not a progressive way of looking at the world, so we need to move on and at least support investigating that.
Okay, so we're happy to support that remit. Yes. Moving on to earthquake-prone buildings.
Not us.
Not us, so happy to abstain. Yes. Rural and regional public transport. Any questions or clarifications needed for that remit?
I'm happy to support it. An issue that's really, really bedeviling us as a region. Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay in particular. It's not a question, sorry, Chair, but...
No, that's fine.
Very happy to support it. It's one that would
Any
serve our region as well as any other.
Yeah.
Any contrary views to that? No? Happy to support. Thank you. Moving on to 10, KiwiSaver contributions for elected members.
KiwiSaver report.
This has come out at a few AGMs.
Question, Chair.
Yes. Yes, Will? Kia ora.
Is that referring to the council enabling deductions from councillor wages to then go to KiwiSaver, or contributions from the council to the councillors' KiwiSaver scheme?
Leanne?
I believe, I'm not sure how it would work, but because councillors are not considered employees, so I can't see how it would be a council contribution as the employer, is an employer's contribution. Mind you, if they do amend it, then they would make sure that they did whatever was necessary to do both. So it is asking, to be able to, for the councillors and also the council.
So supplementary then, if it was coming from the council, where would that money come from? Would it come from the same pool, remuneration pool, and therefore we would get less salary as a result to compensate?
So, that's something the Remuneration Authority would have to figure out, because at the moment it's in addition to your salary. If you're an employee, that employer contribution doesn't come off of your salary. It's in addition to your salary, so it's like a benefit.
And we are capped, so.
It would be a question for the remuneration authority.
Definitely.
I think details to work through.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess ultimately it comes down to, is this more money, costing the ratepayer? And if that's the case, then I wouldn't support it.
Will be more money for the ratepayer.
Any views? Views on supporting or opposing?
I don't feel sufficiently informed either way, to be
Yeah,
fair.
okay. Yes.
It's not so much for or against, but this is a question that has been coming up within governance circles.
Yeah.
So directors, councillors, trustees, et cetera, they are not covered underneath the KiwiSaver Act currently, treated as being self-employed. And so it leads to that question of self-employed, because unlike a employee, if you choose to opt into the KiwiSaver, then whoever your employer is has to make a contribution towards it. And that's basically the actual nut of it. The fact that you're treated as self-employed,
Yeah.
you have the obligation to fund yourself. If this goes through, yeah, it will fall back onto the ratepayer, one way or the other. Got it.
All right, well, we might just have a vote. That one, so, or just hands up on who supports. Supporter. Who, yeah, who oppose? Who want to abstain?
It's the easy option. Let's go sitting on the fence. It's fences.
Well, it's
I'll
not
put my
just
hand
that.
up, by the way.
It's not, so did I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So-
actually, we're interested in this. So
Yeah.
I prefer that we don't, I prefer to abstain on the basis I'm not a disinterested
Okay,
party.
that's okay.
I think the real intent of the remit is around attraction to local government and the barriers that are in place, and for some people coming out of waged employment, KiwiSaver is an important part of their savings program, and if that is deterring people from entering local government, then that's something that should be addressed. That's why I'm supporting it.
Well, the abstained have outnumbered the support and opposed.
Yep.
Thank you, though. Okay, our last remit, audit New Zealand fees. Any questions or clarifications?
What a bloody hell.
No one likes audit fees.
Madam Chair, I think you missed remit 8, the resolution service.
And 7.
Sorry, 8 in the actual paper. Establishing a
Yes.
resolution service, yeah. Happy to support.
Establishing a resolution service. To support?
Would be.
Okay, there's no opposition there. Audit New Zealand fees. Questions, clarifications?
Cheaper the better.
No?
Necessary evil.
Necessary evil. Yes. Okay.
Chair, I
Yes.
just do have a question. So I took it from the paper that for the majority of local government, Audit New Zealand appoints auditors. Are those generally external audit? I mean, so our auditor is Pricewaterhouse off the top of my head. Are they audited through, or so they're appointed through that process, or are we outside of this process?
So this is talking about the auditors that do the annual plan, LTP, all of that. That's appointment by the government, I think. And our current auditors are Ernst & Young.
Okay, so, all right, the key point being that this is not our financial audit, this is our planning audit.
No, it is the financial audit. They audit all the financials and everything through the annual plan and the LTP.
So
this is not, this is not like the internal audits that we do through the Risk and Audit Committee. That's not this. This is for the auditors that audit our financials and our annual plan and our annual report and our LTP.
Okay, so my question then is, we appoint them ourselves directly, or we do it through Audit NZ? So we have no involvement in the price setting for that? No. Okay, thank you.
Really generated by the fact that there's been some very variable service around the country. So if this council's had good service, that's a good thing, but many councils haven't.
Okay. Any further discussion on those remits? Anand, would you like each of them to be read out to clarify, or we're happy where we landed? You've got all the, Leanne, all the responses?
I think I do. Did we support or oppose the rates rebate?
Rates
After all,
rebate.
trying to figure out
Support.
what it was for. You
Support.
did, okay.
Yeah,
I
we
thought you
support.
had.
Yeah.
Right, so if you would like, I can read through them, just so to make sure that I've got the right things. So remit 1 was allocation of risk and liability, and that was abstain. Rates rebate was support. 3 was roading and transport maintenance funding, that was support. 4, local election accessibility support. Remit 5, ability for co-chairs was support. Remit 6, parking infringement penalties was an abstention. Remit 7, rural and regional public transport. Support. Establishing resolution support was number 8, and that was support. Earthquake-prone buildings, abstain. Number 10, Kiwi Saver, abstain. And 11, audit fees, support.
Apply.
And then if we can get a mover and a seconder and resolve that Councillor Thompson Hokianga, as the presiding delegate, will vote on behalf of council.
Councillor Van Wyk, happy to move. Councillor McIntosh, second. No other speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you.
That's
Kia ora
15 minutes
koutou.
we'll never see again.
What's that, sorry?
It's 15 minutes we'll never see again.
Just Chair, I would observe that I think that we should be alive as a council to this option. I'm not sure how effective these things are and what the track record has been historically. But I raised an issue before about predator control and deer control. There are issues, as we've noticed with recovery, that are best addressed at national level, that are beyond the capacity of local government, and maybe we need to be a bit more alive in future to this opportunity, and I guess it would be a request on the staff to bring to our attention well in advance of when remits are due, any burning issues for the staff around funding or legislative structures or whatever it might be. That means that we could actually be starting to be proactive on some of these remits as an organisation with some of the headaches facing us for next year. Because there's some great ideas in some of this, and as I said before, speaking collectively as a sector, you have a bigger impact. So can I just perhaps table that for future reference?
Yep, good point. Leanne, would you like to just briefly describe the process to get a remit in?
So from what I understand, LGNZ will make a call for remits, and most of them go through the zone meetings. So you'll recall that we have a couple of representatives. I think we're in zone 3. And so councils will take what they're thinking and their remits along to those meetings, and they'll be discussed. And then you have to have a certain level of support for it to then be accepted by the LGNZ to go forward through their AGM.
Thank you. I think it's just a matter of understanding the timeline well in advance.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't understand that at the moment, but I'm sure we can get that detailed so that we have a better heads up.
Well, perhaps the minutes could just record that we'll get a timeline for future reference on this process for a consideration by this organisation of remits in future.
Thank you.
Actually, Chair, Di and I were unable to make the last Zone 3 meeting, so that could be how that came about.
No, okay.
Quite understandable to be fair. There's a lot going on, but
I can understand her, she couldn't get
Yeah,
out.
exactly, she couldn't get off the farm, but you know, an excuse. All bridges were going.
Hey,
No,
so
that's
our
still
rates team is still preparing that documentation for us, so I propose that we have a 10-minute coffee break and we'll come back.
Yes, go to
If we can please resume on item 5, the regional cyclone recovery charge. So we have 3 pieces of information here. Vanessa, would you like to take us through them, please? Or
I'll lead out. So,
okay.
if I could draw your attention first to the page, number of rating units paying less or more than the SUIP, this table, the landscape table. So on this page, this was the analysis done comparing the flat charge of $75 for every single property to the 3 options that are now in front of you, with the $55 flat charge plus either on CV, on LV or on general rate. The slight confusion you may have with this paper is that what's in your paper as option 1 is actually the second item here, so LV. And so the key thing here is that in answer to your question about the general range of change, the general range is most properties will have a $25 decrease or increase. So most properties sit in that middle portion of the table. And the reason that we came to you recommending the LV over the CV methodology was because the swings are slightly less, the extremes are less. And the second reason for that would be that it's more consistent with our general rate. And third reason being that if we have a targeted rate based on CV, there would be some property owners where that charge would actually be the largest portion of their rates. So those were the 3 key bits of reasoning behind our recommendation. The only other thing that I would note is that when we look at the other bit of explanation, sorry, on the paper you'll see the dollar figures. So say if we go to greater than $1,000, the explanation of that dollar figure, say 2,430, those dollar figures are the maximums for each scenario. So the greatest, the biggest changes really are, so if we look at the greatest decreases are any properties where there are a large number of SUIPs, so of units. Things like retirement villages or large leasehold properties where we would have been putting out lots of SUIPs to one property, and the change from moving from that to a variable rate is significant in those cases. So those are the options in front of us. A little bit more explanation there.
And then we have the sample properties that we were looking at. So these are the ones that are typically in our annual plan, long-term plan. So we have all the same properties that we usually have, and at the bottom of each of these, you'll see the cyclone recovery charge. So then you'll see the fixed charge of $55 and then the variable rate below it of whatever amount that usually sits there.
Okay, are there any further questions for the team? Now we have this added information. So going back to
I just have one, Chair.
Yes.
I'm only just acquainting myself with this data. Regional recovery SUIP, Emerson Street, Napier, everything else in that column seems to be 55. That one's gone to 110. Why is that one 110?
It's how many SUIPs they have. So if they have
Oh, it just happened to be that property had
two
SUIPs. Didn't know that 110 was twice 55. I just didn't know why.
So there's 32. You do your homework, Martin.
Relatively just so.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have recommendations.
Sorry, and these tables are on land or capital?
Land value.
I would like to move that we accept the recommendation.
So for option one,
Yep, for option one.
Second that.
happy to second that. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I think thanks to staff for being as conscientious as you have been, looking at how it will affect our rates base, and then at high speed come up with this table, which actually makes it very clear that actually it's a fair and even across the board. And although there will be some winners and losers in this, I think you've chosen the best option, and hence I'm in favour of option one. Thank you.
Chair. Yeah, reiterate those comments from a fellow councillor. This is it's a massive job of work. You've turned around this particular question very, very fast. I just want to take us back to where we started. Where we started was the principle that we had these separate flood-related charges. We wanted to ring-fence them. We came up with a 75, and we wanted to democratise that across the population as much as we could, but recognising that where people have been impacted, there's remissions and rebates policies apply. We've struck the problem that we couldn't go down the full 75 route without hitting the 30% barrier. So we've done the best we can with that and found the most consistent, the way of reassigning the difference between the 55 and the 75 to something which is most consistent with the principles that we adopted, land value and also ring fence, so not adding to general rates, so that we've got stronger visibility over the fact that we're at general rates, and our general rates control is as good as possible. And again, commending the staff for making the decisions to bring us recommendations about keeping that general rates rise down to 6%. Very well done, thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I hold a different view, and it's based on, if you like, first principles here. Appreciate on the numbers that we're looking at, that the quantum, the $25, the amount, there's very little between one methodology and the next. But however, I adopt an approach that says we are asking the entire region to pay, and on the basis of their ability to pay, which is fundamental to the notion of taxation. And I'm seeing capital value as a slightly more equitable way of arriving at that point, given the nature of the spend that we've got in mind. It's a burden that should be shared right across the entire region, but it's a burden that equitably ought to fall more on those with the ability to pay, as opposed to, if you like, the flat line that we arrive at generally with land value versus capital value. It's something that I've pursued for a long time now, is the equity. So when I drive around Maranui and Piramai and Maunikawa, a large number of fixed income, low income people living in those zones have a lesser ability to pay than the commercial properties and the high value residential properties. So I keep coming back to it, that's where I instinctively fall on that. I appreciate the numbers and well done in producing them like this, because it shows a little difference. I'd like to dive into some more, but so I land on CV. I think that's the best scenario.
Any other speakers? No, there are none. We'll put this to a vote. All those who agree with the recommendation option 1, say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Against.
Against and noted. Carried. Thank you.
Sorry, yes.
Oh, Will?
Just took me a while to find mute. Yeah, I'm with Councillor Curtin, please, Chair.
Yeah, and recorded, Councillor. Okay, thank you. Kia ora. Thank you so much for all the work that's gone in here. It's been many steps to get here. But I do take note of Councillor Curtin's comments around our rates review process, where we can make those bigger impacts when we look at CV and land value. But for this exercise, it was an annual plan. We decided on a recovery charge, and we've tried to find the best way, knowing there's winners and losers whenever we strike rates. So thank you very much for your effort. Kia ora. Thanks. We move on to item 6, deliberations on the annual plan. We have covered some ground here with the other 2 items. So I'll just open up to you, Desiree, and Mandy. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. So the purpose of this delibs paper is just to provide a high-level analysis of the submissions to assist you with your deliberations today. Regarding the engagement, it was 2-pronged. It was to find out what people thought of our annual plan engagement document, also to find out what was important to people in the recovery from Cyclone Gabriel, but also to use it as a bit of a communications tool to provide an update and to share our organisation's journey from Cyclone Gabriel, the impact, our response, how we're working differently, etc. So it was a bit of a storytelling tool as well. And as you'll be aware from Sarah's paper, we received 87 submissions. The majority of those were from individuals, 7 were from organisations, including 2 from Wairoa District Council. And in reading the submissions, as we've discussed, the very strong theme is the need, the desire for more horse riding trails. Nearly 3/4 of people did talk about that. And that was around having more trails, better quality, safer, and also better access for horse floats and tracks, etc. Safety was a real concern. That did come up a lot. People wanting somewhere safe to ride their horses and access for their trucks and floats. Also, there was a real sentiment that people felt cyclists and walkers were well catered for, and that the horse riding community felt a bit forgotten. The next theme, people needing to feel safe, and that the second largest theme, and that was around having adequate protection through stop banks, dredging and clearing out rivers, having better communication from council, better warning systems. And then to a lesser degree, the third and fourth themes were build back and better, and helping people that have been impacted by Cyclone Gabriel. And then also in this paper, you'll note, we've talked about other points that were raised. That includes roadside drainage in Wairoa, the Wairoa Regional Park, and planned reduction in funding for biodiversity and pest control. And for the new councillors, in the annual plan process, once council has adopted the annual plan, we do write to, we send out a generic letter to all submitters, and where we see that we need a more tailored submission, we do that as well, and that happens within a month of adopting the annual plan. And that is actually one of the recommendations today. Are you happy with the line of response that we've provided in this paper? If you do want to add any more to that. And the further recommendation is that after deliberating on this, that we recommend that we don't see any need to change the proposed annual plan as it is. But some of the things that we obviously take on board, but they'll be addressed through a long-term planning process.
Thank you, Mandy. Any other further comments? I know we've provided feedback in an earlier paper around those submitters, but is there any more to add? Thank you, Councillor Sears.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I thought, given the situation that a lot of people in, that it was a good response. Certainly it's clear that the horse riding communities got together, which was excellent. I mean, that's a really good way and a really good way to use the annual plan, and something probably groups need to do more to bring their views forward. It's what we open it up for across all these things. So I was really pleased to see that. In terms of the horse riding submissions, I just wanted to understand a little bit more, 2 things. the Puketapu Pub Horse Trail is temporarily closed. I'm assuming that's cyclone damage? Yes, and that'll be in work. The top of the stop banks that can be ridden on for bikes, I'm wondering about ownership of those. Are they actually all regional council owned, or are some of those?
Chris,
Open that up to asset management.
Thank you.
So in terms of the trails, it's a mixed ownership model. Obviously, any trails that are on our assets or on our land are owned by us and managed by us. And then when they go onto other councils' land, it's then managed by them. So the network is owned by various parties.
Can I just, a few more questions? So I note that we'll be looking in 24 onward to how we could extend or consult or discuss how the trail network could be extended, but that's going to be very much across council then, because a lot of those assets will be Hastings District Council, some will be Napier.
That's right. So in terms of the Great Trail Network, that resource is funded by all councils, and it looks at the totality of that particular network.
Okay, so there's definitely an opportunity next year for that to be well discussed and looked at, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I do wonder, the other part of the submission was around access and parking cars and floats, etc. I mean, hands up, I'm a horse rider. So I understand all of that, but a lot of these places are not regional council land. I'm thinking of places like the beaches, Waimarama. Ocean Beach I know is quite a tricky one. It's a lot of private land there, but I'm wondering if in the response to the horse riders that we could also note that it's important that they're discussing that with the district council around the parking, particularly around rivers and beaches, because those are tied up with district council. So I wouldn't want them to think that, it would be easy to think that regional council are going to be controlling all of that, but in actual fact, I think it's probably quite a small part. So, very supportive, and I'm pleased to see them submit, and if we can give them a little bit more information to make sure they don't miss other submission points with other councils. And Madam Chair, if it's okay, I had one more question on one other issue right down in land reduction and funding for biodiversity and pest control, 45. It says HBRC is undertaking reviews on the performance of river schemes, and we have received funding to undertake studies on the nature-based measures. We'll be carrying those out on the financial years. I was interested to know what funding have we received, please. I didn't know about that.
Excuse me, Chris, are you possibly able to provide feedback on point 45? Oh, no, so Ian's coming up.
Yeah,
Great.
that's me.
Sorry.
So through your chair, we've received about $600,000 through the extreme weather event funding that Ministry for Business, Innovation and Environment made available to undertake some assessments of nature-based solutions for the catchments in the scheme. So that's money that we've just recently got. The work hasn't commenced yet.
600,000. 600,000. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, once again, I think it's great that we've got some very good submissions, even though it was under trying times. And I think we should reward good behaviour, which is the equestrian community. Because currently we have our infrastructure is sort of smashed about a bit. And it's not only for horse riding, it's also for motorbike riding, for active transport. And I think this should really, for us as a council, trigger that we actually should review what we actually make available to the public. We've actually shrunk the area that people actually can play out in open areas. Some of the beaches are now going to be closed off to be used, for instance, for four-wheel driving. Any cars on beaches it's already being hampered and stopped. So we definitely see, with a lot of gates and fences gone, that we now actually have people taking sort of the law in their own hand, and we see it actually happening on newly established stop banks where four drives and motorbikes are doing a lot of damage on quite fragile infrastructure. And I think we need to start thinking in the future, maybe a little bit soon, that we actually need to make spaces available for our community, like, for instance, the equestrian community. And so I think by sort of giving kudos to them for taking the time to give us feedback, that we take this further. And not only the equestrians, there's the community, there's other communities. For instance, the guys who are driving their motocross bikes. They just have a lot of adrenaline. They're generally guys who do this. Am I okay, Mr. Councillor Curtin, by saying that? You're not going to throw anything at me for not being PC enough? He's done it in the past, you see, for those new councillors that are here. We just need to think about what space that of area that we actually cover and manage do we make available, how do we make it available? And it includes also then the possibilities of fly dumping, which is another major issue around our rural areas. And these are just issues that actually are compounding due to the cyclone. So once again, we should reward good behaviour, and that's by taking note of what they've actually submitted to us about.
Thank you, Councillor Van Beek. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add a further thought for the equestrian community and something to convey, please, back to them. The theme of making room for rivers is going to be a strong one going forward, and will feature heavily, I'm sure, in future LTPs. That will create more opportunity and more opportunity to plan better for multi-use in some of these spaces. So I think, we've got that firmly on the agenda from a flood risk management point of view, but we can also take the opportunity to think about recreation in its many forms. Noting, of course, some lack of compatibility between maybe the motorcycle riders and the horses, but yeah, with good planning we can find a space for everybody. Thank you.
Point, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question and then an observation. If I might be permitted to do those in order. The first was a question really to Chris and his team. There was a charge levelled in the Wairoa District Council submission that the staff had been absent and hadn't been adequately repairing drains and things like that, or maintaining drainage schemes in Wairoa. I was grateful to receive and see the feedback, the staff feedback to that submission. Is there anything Chris wanted to add to that in terms of the submission points made and the work being done in that context? Just to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor. So what I can say is we're trying very hard to recognise that when we have staff in Wairoa this scene, we have staff up in Wairoa all of the time. We have integrated catchment staff permanently based in Wairoa. So the view that staff are totally absent, I guess I don't share that view. We had machinery in at Wairoa as soon as the roads opened, and that work stopped due to the wet conditions, and that has been a problem due to the 3 wet years we've had. And you can see in there the concerted effort by the team to work with Wairoa District Council to work through a lot of those legacy issues around who owns what asset. And just a reminder to our councillors here that we have a significant investment into our asset management systems so that we can keep good records and aren't reliant on staff remembering whose assets are whose, and that they are all well documented and available to any staff member who wants to have a look. So I think we're doing quite a lot in that space, and we'll continue to work with Wairoa District Council on that.
Thank you.
And now my observation, if that's possible, or would you rather? It's interesting what's not there in the feedback, and I've already made some observations on the feedback we did receive, but fundamentally this was an annual plan that really trimmed or cut our cloth to, the saying. We've kept rates down as far as we can by jettisoning some projects that are dear to the heart of many of the staff. And I guess, you know, the fact that submissions have been focused on equestrian trails and all credit to them, is possibly a reflection that we've landed in a good place on that, and we may have received some pushback on rates increase in the current economic context. What I really wanted to note, though, is that within the dominant theme of keeping our communities safe, and there's another theme of building back better, and then there's making rivers room, which making room for rivers, which Forest and Bird have made. I really think perhaps as an organisation we need to better explain the three stages that are involved here. There was the first stage of repairing the banks to what they were. Done. There is the next stage of getting Category 2 areas to Category 1. All right? But that does not mean we have lost sight of the third stage, the longer term stage, and as Councillor Harding mentioned, beyond the next long-term plan and for the future. There is a decade and beyond that, multi-decade endeavour, I think, to look at new approaches, and I just don't want anyone to have the impression that we don't have that on our radar, but the immediate priority is keeping people safe, fixing what was there, getting Category 2s to 1, and then I think we can embark on that broader initiative that has been impressed upon us so compellingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We had Councillor Roadley and then Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, William. Councillor Williams.
Fine, Roadley. Thank you, William. Still good, though.
Yes, I had wanted to thank the submitters from Wairoa for your fabulous input into our annual plan, and also the Wairoa District Council, and I was quite heartened that some of their submissions we've already got in motion with regard to developing a more joined up approach between our different councils and other community groups, including Taro. There has been an enduring concern from the Wairoa District Council about our lack of presence, and I concur with you, Chris, that may not be based in reality, more just a lack of observation. Could you just speak around, I know that we've talked at length around the things that we are doing, and I was very pleased to see the Awatiri drain cleaned out, so thank you for that, and battling with weather to get those jobs done. How can the people of Wairoa, including the Wairoa District Council, have confidence in knowing what works are planned and how that will roll out over the next 12 months?
Look, so as you've suggested, we do have a significant package. I think we've got a $300,000 package around the Awatiri stream in terms of cleaning that up. So I think that's just communicating that with the Wairoa District Council. I know our staff are meeting up on a 6-weekly basis, and we've got staff in Wairoa every week. I think our number one priority at the moment is working on flood defences or solutions for Wairoa, and that's what the team is working hard on at the moment, to make sure that the next tropical cyclone that comes down maybe, won't impact Wairoa in the same way. So that's our top priority at the moment.
Just to follow up, thank you, Chris, and that was exactly where I was heading with that, and as I mentioned earlier, our heartfelt sorrow around not being able to progress the regional parks, both at Wairoa and Ahuriri. But I am feeling really confident that we are taking the right approach with focusing all of our attention on our flood protection, and I thank you and your teams for doing that. I did also note, if I can have another go, please, Chair, that one of our submitters who, sorry, I'm taking off, this is going to be command recorded, talking about the concerns around the Wairoa River and how we propose to do our upper catchment management as part of our flood protection. And could I just invite Ian maybe just to address those concerns around how we are looking at what we're doing to manage the Wairoa River and its many streams and tributaries that flow into it, and what we're actively doing in the next 12 months to improve those outcomes.
So, councillor, just for clarity, that's in the areas outside any flood and drainage network. We're talking a broader.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about how we're managing our edge protection and our upper catchment programs and how that will impact on our whānau down in the bottom.
Sure. So just for clarity, and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong here, there's no edge protection per se in a formal sense in the Wairoa catchment because there is no scheme operating. But I think probably what the question is what has been the impact of the riparian areas in these catchments, and not probably exclusively to the Wairoa catchment, but in many areas where woody debris or trees have been effectively growing in the river channel, and then in the course of the event, all of that material has been picked up and mobilised and ended up on assets and land and beaches. So we've traditionally not taken a program of work that specifically addressed the control and maintenance of those areas. So there hasn't been any programmed work to remove what have effectively been large areas of wilding species of willow, poplar, significant amounts of native vegetation as well. But that's not to say that couldn't be something that council considers in the future as part of a broader integrated approach to catchment management. There would obviously be a resourcing requirement and a way of working that would need to be developed. Probably the more fundamental question is really what works and what doesn't in these flood areas and the riparian margins, and we know that there's a lot of there are a lot of questions around the value of ongoing retirement and then planting of riparian margins. So there is specific work that we're moving through with Manaki Whenua Landcare Research to understand what worked and what didn't in this event, and has this event changed our view of our traditional thinking around things like soil conservation plantings, riparian management, those sorts of things? We don't have those answers yet. Initial views are that this hasn't really taught us anything that we didn't already understand, but that the scale of the event was such that any vegetation in those flood areas and those river corridors were going to be vulnerable and will have been removed as part of the flood.
And Ian, is there an opportunity for those constituents who are deeply interested in this to feed into that review of what they saw and what they think?
I suspect there probably will be, and look, we've already started those conversations to an extent. The farmer group that operates, I think they're called the 215 farmers that we're engaging with in the wider community, they've actually been running some small scale trials of tree removal on the Wairoa margins of the river. Won't name names, but there's been some small scale localised work to figure out what happens if you remove those big trees. Is it a positive, is it a negative? And we're going back in there to get that feedback from them. And, that'll be built into a broader program of work which might involve any scheme that Chris's team develops, but also what does an integrated catchment approach look like for that catchment and others. The challenge for you is going to be the scale and resourcing requirement to effectively council undertake management of those margins through every watercourse in the region. It would be a not inconsequential job.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've only got 12 questions. No, I haven't.
You're going to run off.
I just wanted, I want to go to submitter 26. This is Wendy Yang, who's in the Heratonga Hastings constituency. Question for Chris. This submitter, not a horse in sight in this particular one, but poses some very, very significant questions because we are putting a hand in ratepayers' pockets for this year alone, the $75, for example, lots of money to be spent on recovery. And this submitter is posing the issues in addition to building back stop banks. What are we going to do to build back better in regard to, in this case, her point one, the warning systems on the rivers. Then we've got another question, and I don't know if it's for you, Chris, but it's possibly for the chair, around the action plan for disaster recovery or disaster response, and I think it's a civil defence question, really. So the issues are we've got responsibility to do much more across the board, not just in building back physical infrastructure, but building back a much more resilient and responsive system given climate change. Chris, can you answer the first question on what are you going to do about warning?
So that's a two-part question, but the majority of the instrumentation sits with Ian, and there's a number of reviews underway, so I'll let him comment first.
Yeah, so, sorry, just quickly having a quick look at it. So there's been a comprehensive review of our telemetry system, both from a network perspective and from a communications perspective, that we're just going through the final documentation on at the moment. We'll bring to you. We haven't waited for the reviews to conclude to initiate a number of programs to build further redundancy into our communication system. So we're close to having an analogue and a digital solution for both repeater sites. All of our sites have been reviewed, individual sites have been reviewed for, in terms of their location, is it still the best place to have them? The feedback is by and large yes, so there's no need to change them. And what we've been doing is bringing in further communications channels to those key flood warning sites. So in many cases now we've got three forms of communication, our traditional radio system, a cellular network and a satellite network, so that in any reasonable situation that we could envisage, at least one of those channels would be working for us if let's say two of them failed. So all of that work is on the go at the moment, and as we get to each site, and there are some sites that we still physically have been unable to get full access to other than walking to them, we are reinstating them with that triple redundancy and linking them into both that digital and analogue radio system.
Well, that's certainly very encouraging news. Just a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, in regard to that. Ian, that funding for those particular improvements and developments, I'd imagine that they come out of the recovery money. Where do you see the money coming from?
So we've funded it to date using our existing capital reserves. As we get to the point where we're building further into the network, we'll be using the recovery funding for that. And we've secured a reasonable sum of money, we have a reasonable sum of money that we're asking for to do that comprehensive rollout of the physical infrastructure and the communications as well.
Thanks so much. Madam Chair, would you be able to respond to the other part of that question in regard to responsiveness in emergencies?
Yeah, so the first thing is the CDM review and the national inquiry that will address some of those concerns and problems for improvements. But Dr. Nick Tate, would you like to add any further?
I take the submitter's point as being really around future disasters rather than the current action plan. So in my view, the region needs to have a peacetime written recovery plan that sets out how it will deal with recovery. I haven't yet got to the point of looking at that and understanding what that looks like. One of the common things around recovery is the need for, yes, good coordination, and the only way you get that good coordination is by the peacetime relationship building and practical training that you do. And that's something which both those two reviews, but also I'm really keen to have a look at it and understand how that currently works. Volunteers, as the submitter says, are part of that, and volunteers, well supported and coordinated, do an amazing job. But again, those mechanisms need to be put in place in peacetime. And so I think we need to have a good hard look at how that currently is set up and established.
Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, there are two submissions that I just want to raise that cry out for a response from Council. Number 74, Susan Grace Rowland's story of feeling like being locked out on a cold winter's night whilst you're banging on a door that never answers. So there's a story there about regular flooding of their property, Makaretu River east of Takapau sewage outlet, so not only water but sewage by the sound of it. I'd like, rather than a standard response there, for us to have a considered response that looks at what advice we have given or can give to that particular situation, because there's a very deep-seated long-term issue there that has been compounded by the flood. So I'd like to think that we actually address the concerns that have driven them to submit, please. So that's number 74. Number 87 raises a more general question about woody debris and slash in relation to Wairoa, and whether or not Council's research on that to date has sufficiently captured the contribution of forestry slash in the Wairoa area. And I just wanted to take the opportunity, it's probably to ask Ian, I think, just to respond on where we're at in terms of our understanding of slash and the previous report that's gone out in relation to Wairoa, and whether there's any other work or any kind of how we should respond to that, whether that submitter is accurately represented, that our reporting has effectively underrepresented the impact of slash in the Wairoa area, please.
Through you, Chair. Look, I think first question is, are we satisfied with the validity of our initial reporting on the woody debris? Yeah, the answer is yes. So we don't have anything that tells us that that scenario has changed or that the information we've got is wrong. Probably the more fundamental question is what has been the impact of different land uses on the debris kind of situation in the region. I mentioned earlier that we are working with Manaki Whenua looking at the landslip susceptibility and actually what happened during this event. For two reasons. One is we obviously want to understand so that we're better informed about how, from a policy and regulatory perspective, we might be looking to put in place the right sort of policy and rule framework to get the right outcomes, but also that we want to make sure that where things we believe are still important and valuable for our sustainable land management picture, that the evidence of that is not lost in the heat of the moment with stuff sitting in people's backyards. So the question is really, has that traditional view of soil conservation and the use of production forestry, poles and other techniques, is that still relevant and applicable to the region? And is the fact that we're seeing, I would say not slash, but radiata forest, trees sitting on floodplains, a product of the failure of that species and it's where it's been put, or just a product of the fact that it was a large-scale event and actually any material of its age would have moved. So we're looking to unpick that so that we can then use that evidence base to say, well, what's the right tree in the right place, managed in the right way for the right outcomes? We don't have those answers yet. We do want to bring the Manaki Whenua team to a recovery committee to explain to you their work and what they're finding, so that you're better informed of that. But no absolute answers at the moment, other than a lot of anecdotal evidence that says actually the traditional methods work.
Thank you.
Councillor Lambert.
Just continuing on with the submission by the Wairau District Council about the cyclone recovery. In the staff response, you talked about establishing a resilience group, a combined team. Could you just expand on that and say like when that was started and who's in the team, and have you actually contributed to the work schemes that are coming up in the near future in the annual plan?
So my understanding of that resilience group is simply staff from both organisations getting together regularly. It was initiated by the Wairoa District Council, who procured some river engineering resources of their own directly after the event, and so we've come in and working together on potentially what those solutions look like for Wairoa. So that's
because you've obviously worked out a work plan for the next for the annual plan, and this
so
Wairoa contributed to that.
So what the job of that was the first part of working out what are the potential solutions for Wairoa in terms of protecting the North Clyde area. So that is specifically what they're looking at, and we've brought additional resources in, engineering resources to work through those solutions. They are quite complex. There's a number of challenges, and that's what they're working through.
Exactly, cool. Just thanks to the staff for the responses, and that's pretty good.
Any further discussion before we move on this paper? There are none. Could I please have a mover and a seconder to receive these? Thank you, Councillor Curtin, Councillor Sears. Would you like to speak any further?
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, in terms of next steps for staff drafting up a response and then reporting back for adoption of the annual plan, I'd make this comment that this is a significant milestone or point along the journey in terms of regional recovery, and I'm very heartened by the actions already taken by the council to recover. One being standing up the riverbanks so quickly, tremendous effort there, and the commentary from Mr Maxwell around the warning scenario. We probably need to hear more about our capacity to respond in an emergency and make sure we give, I think, the critical thing we need to do in this exercise and subsequent exercises is to restore trust and confidence in this council. Along with the cyclone, the region has taken a physical battering, but I would suggest that our council as well, in terms of its reputation, has taken a bit of a battering in certain areas, some justified, a lot not. So we need to demonstrate with our narrative around this what we're doing, that we're onto it, that we are now asking the region to pay a substantial amount of money this time round, and next time it'll be even more, and we need to justify that with a great deal of transparency and openness about what we're doing, but responding in particular to submitters. Hopefully we can get more horse riding done, but at the same time, probably more urgent needs are to restore and protect the community in the first instance, and then we can go riding horses more safely. Mr Chair.
Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with all of Councillor Curtin's comments, and a big thank you to staff, because part of that openness and transparency and working hard to give our community trust and confidence is taking the time to put this together and put it out for comment, which I know you did in such a short amount of time. So a huge thank you to staff under what we all know are really pressured situations, and thank you to the submitters who were able to feed back to us.
Absolutely. Any other speakers? Yeah, none. Oh, Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, I just want to acknowledge all the work gone in from staff, all the submitters, but also acknowledge the people that didn't submit. So since the cyclone in particular, you know, we've all attended a lot of community meetings and got a lot of feedback. My phone still goes every day. And so I just want to acknowledge all those people that continue to engage. And, you know, I'm pretty clear from my own constituents exactly, you know, what are the issues down in my patch and the things that the regional council need to address. So I just want to acknowledge everyone really that's participated in not only just this process, but just the full engagement with council over the last few months.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. And you have our feedback for those specific letters to go back, so thank you. So all those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Kia ora. Thank you, team. Okay, so we're early, team, so we can go to lunch earlier. So that is the end of our extraordinary meeting for today.
It was truly extraordinary.
It was truly extraordinary. So we've covered all items on the agenda.
Just early.
We have finished early, and we have a workshop this afternoon after lunch. Good boy. Who would like to close our close with a karakia?
We did resolve.
Yeah. Ali, would you like to lead us in karakia?
That's right.
Kia ora tātou, me karakia tātou te manaakitanga, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ato tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te piwhina taitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, 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 ake.
Āmene. Kia ora koutou.
Oh, thank you.